Hey folks, we're back with the Dev Twitch stream. My name is Nick Taylor. I'm a senior software engineer at Forem. Forem is the software that powers Dev.
And I'm Christina Gorton. I'm the open source community manager here at Forem. And today we have a special guest, Dan Ott. Dan, do you want to talk about yourself a little?
Hi, I'm Dan. I do front-end development. Uh, I'm an independent developer. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I am also involved with Virtual Coffee, so check that out, virtualcoffee.io. It's a developer community, and I do some work with Cleveland React as well. So that's clereact.dev.
Shout out to
And yeah,
Cleveland.
me and Nick have been hanging out in Virtual Coffee for yeah, Cleveland, that's right. So me and Nick have been hanging out at Virtual Coffee, I don't know, a few months or whatever, and I don't know, he invited me on, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, cool. So glad you could come on. We got a fun issue to work on today that we're going to be working on a front end issue. Um, I don't know if you want to just pull that up, Dan, and then we can just take a peek at it so the folks at home can see it. And I know you had
Yeah,
some discussions with Pavel, who's one of our product designers. So maybe just kind of go through what you were kind of discussing in there too, just to kind of put everybody up to speed.
absolutely. So I saw this issue as kind of a newer issue, and it's about the gap property and using it with Flexbox. So Flexbox sort of came out earlier than CSS Grid, right? And so a lot of browsers supported it much sooner than Grid. One of the coolest things that Grid had when it came out was the gap property. It's started as Grid gap, but basically you set that on the container, and then it does the layout for you, where it adds spacing between all these elements. I should have pulled up a nice like explainer for this, but the
Ah, that's cool.
without having to mess with margins or padding on individual children, right? So um, after Grid CSS Grid came out, the standards body decided to add the gap property to Flexbox as well. So um, now in most modern browsers, you can say you can add the gap property to Flexbox and space out your children from like the container down. The problem is that Safari has not caught up to that quite yet. So that's what this bug is about. And this
Okay.
is true for iOS, mobile Safari, whatever you call it too,
Mhm.
but also the desktop version. There's probably other browsers. So I had this tab open earlier, and but
Uh,
Can I Use actually has a nice little table for this. Let's
yeah,
see
it's a
here.
great site for checking out if
Yeah,
you can
property for
use it.
Flexbox. It's the first one. Yes, Can I Use is like one of the best tools that has come out for this sort of thing for front end stuff. You can pretty much type anything into this box, and it will show you what support browsers have. And so you can see here, like, I mean, I don't know when this came out. Let's see, released, yeah, July 2020. So really not that long ago, right? That Chrome even supported it. Same with Firefox. Well,
Yeah.
Firefox, I guess, pulled it out a little earlier, but um, it was only supported in Chrome as of July of this past year. So
Yeah, it's still pretty
the rest of the
fresh.
browsers, a lot of other browsers haven't caught up, and obviously still pretty fresh. And IE is obviously IE is it's Internet Explorer is Internet Explorer. It is what it is. But the it's a really handy feature for a lot of like layout cases, and be nice to use. And anyway, that's what this bug is about. So
This just shows
there's
me
a
how long it's
handful
been
of
since I've written CSS because I was like, wait, you can do Gap now in Flex? This is
Yeah. We're from the
right,
future.
right. Well, that's the thing.
I knew with
Yeah,
Grid.
that's right. Yeah, exactly. So everyone was like, "This is the most handy feature ever" when
Yeah.
they started using Grid, and and so that everybody realized that, and then added it back to Flex. So like these browsers support Flex, no problem, but the Gap thing is a new piece. So there's in the Forem repo, there's just randomly in random spots spots where this was used, flex, display flex, but with the gap property, and looks fine in Firefox. It looks fine in.
Someone was like, "We can use
in
this now. We're just going to put it everywhere in Forem."
Yeah,
Yeah.
Before
and
checking.
and
Nick, was
Yeah.
this
Well,
you?
it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one to track down. Yeah.
yeah, and
So yeah. So that's the idea. So, oh, go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna give a bit of context to it too. So we don't we don't have an official supported list of browsers yet, but I can 100% tell you that we do not support any version of Internet Explorer or the old Edge, like the pre-Chromium based Edge. So having said that, that's pretty much we're pretty modern in terms of the browsers, and I mean, Flexbox has been available for quite a while in those browsers, and I think we started using Grid heavily when I started last January, because Pavel, who's one of our product designers, he was working. He probably popped this in because I was the lone front end until recently, so Pavel was working a lot in there too. So yeah. So
Nick's just saying,
Um,
"It wasn't me." It
oh
was
no, that's
Nick,
not what I mean.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
we hear you. We hear you.
Yeah. Pavel, if you're listening, that's not what I meant. In unrelated news, Nick has left the company.
Pavel likes getting recognition. We're just giving him recognition.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the history of Flexbox and Grid is actually really interesting. And it's another place where Can I Use actually will help you break some things down, because it'll show you like footnotes, like, okay, so this supports Grid, but only with the prefix MS, only with in certain situations, blah blah blah. But Flex and Grid have been really interesting
Grid's
because
around for a
the syntax
while,
has changed.
but
Yeah.
just on IE, which is funny because it was like Internet Explorer had its Grid, and then now no.
Right.
Not so much.
And the other problem is the layout implementations of those ones is different than the modern one, and it's a whole big mess sometimes. But the decision to not support IE, I'm in favor of. Makes life a little easier.
Well, the thing is,
Safari is still big enough, especially iOS Safari, that you need to kind of track that one down.
yeah, and the thing with iOS Safari is, like, even if you have, like, I'm using Firefox on my iPhone, but it's still WebKit under the hood, or like iOS Safari,
Right.
I think that's supposed to change at some point, like, because now I know I can't remember if it was iOS 13 or 14, you can choose your default browser now. So that's, I think, like the first step to kind of going to an actual browser. But I don't know if they will allow that eventually, because they're pretty tight with their ecosystem. So I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not. If anybody does know,
Yeah, no, I saw some chatter about that, and I didn't really track it down. I'd be interested to see that too. I also took advantage of the default browser setting in the latest iOS, and also chose Firefox. It's nice.
Yeah, no, I was.
So yeah. Oh, well, I don't know. Do you want me to talk a little bit about this issue specifically? I actually started tracking this down. This will be my first contribution to Forem, and so one of the things I like to do is just kind of figure out how people want things to be done, because every organization, every project has some different like guidelines, and this is one of those where it's well, in the original description he noted like an article that is titled "Grid is for layout and Flex is for components," which is kind of a cool way to break things down. But I was like, is that a law? Is that
like
more of a guideline?
Can we break the law?
So right, exactly. And this bug in particular, well, I don't know if it's a bug, but this issue, it's actually like it's popping up in a bunch of different situations, right? So we're gonna have to like attack them case by case. There might be some that we're like, okay, we did this in the last one and we can just do the same thing, but there are just some different situations. So I was wondering about that guideline. I don't know if he linked to this article that actually has a pretty cool breakdown for this Grid for layout Flexbox for components. idea, we don't need to like dig into this specifically
Yeah.
right now, but
I think it kind of makes
basically
sense as a
ends up
guideline.
right,
As a
right.
guideline, yeah.
It's just
And
like,
generally, like, I go with that as a guideline, but also there's some things that are just really nice, like components and stuff that you can create with like grid that like, which I think Dan, you kind of
yeah,
mentioned in this issue.
Yeah.
Like, hey, there's some things you can do pretty nicely with grid versus
yeah,
Flexbox. And I think that's where he
yeah.
was trying to get the,
Yeah, for
hey,
sure.
do I have to do this?
And I mean, we definitely
I
use
mean, like
grid, so
right, and his answers were pretty much what I would do. I mean, like lined up with how I felt too. It's just um, do the right thing in the right in each situation is basically the call. So, and I had another. I don't need to dig into this because we're not going to do it. But I was like considering some way to automate it so we could keep just using Gap, and
yeah.
check some, I don't know, browser support. But there's no way to check for this, like the lack of support for Flexbox Grid. There's no way to check for it except for with JavaScript. And
Yeah.
the check is basically have JavaScript create this and see if the spacing is right. So it's like real hacky, and then you'd have to apply that down. And I don't know, it wasn't a good
Yeah.
idea, but I just wanted to see if how they approach this in general. But I think
Yeah.
the better call is just to kind of attack them one by one and see what we find.
Yeah.
Can I interject for just 1 second to
Yep.
say something? As the open source
Absolutely.
community manager, what Dan did coming in here and going through the guidelines, setting up stuff, which he did beforehand, but going in and just asking for clarification before jumping onto the issue is fantastic. And we really appreciate it. A lot of times people, some of the issues and bugs are just from people in the community and maybe they don't have that much information in there and you want to tackle it. If you want more information, just ask the questions. That's what we're there for. Ask the questions in Forem and that specific issue, and then we can usually give you more information about what's actually happening, where we need the solution and things like that. So I just wanted to say,
Yeah.
great way to go about it,
Yeah, and
Dan.
just to piggyback on that, it's not to gatekeep the issue or or stuff. It's really, we want to avoid somebody who's excited to contribute to the repository all of a sudden does a ton of work, and then we're like,
Yeah.
well, that's not the direction we wanted to go. So it's
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
it's always good to ask questions, basically. So
I'm the one that has to tell the people that, so do me a favor, y'all.
yeah, Christina's the bad cop.
I will tell you nicely, but I do feel bad for people when they do that. So just keep that in mind.
This is all from I'm on that side of the table a lot too, so I also don't want to. I don't like having to do that either.
Yeah,
You did
for
this
sure.
fantastic work. This is a great PR. We do not
Right,
need this feature. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes, we will.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, especially a feature. A bug is one thing, but a feature, if you
Yeah.
implement something that's not even we hadn't considered yet, that yeah, just ask questions.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So sorry. Getting back to you there, Dan. So yeah, you were having some conversations with Pavel in the issue, and yeah, so you were talking about a potential way to kind of polyfill it in CSS, but it's only really possible via JavaScript because you can only really check for if grid is supported. You can't check if is grid gap supported, I guess.
Yeah, the problem is the with CSS. So CSS has a supports query, I guess, and which is really handy. It could be handy for a lot of things,
Yeah.
but the problem is all these browsers, including Safari, support grid, they support Flex, and they support the gap property. They just don't
Yeah.
support applying the gap property to something that has display flex. And that's the thing that you can't that like supports can't check for. So it'd be a false
Yeah.
positive every time. He had some examples of that, or and like in this article, and it's just all about how like this isn't going to work.
Yeah, because I guess you couldn't even do
It doesn't
like,
matter.
yeah, because like say you started off, like say you wanted to try and do it in CSS, you can't say display grid and then display flexbox and then give a gap because it's going to turn into flex. Or if you do, like, there's no way to really just
A
pure CSS
fallback.
to
There's
do it.
no
Yeah, you
specific
can't do the
fallback.
fallback route.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's all because the property is called the same for Flexbox and for Grid, and so
Yeah.
if they hadn't been like, I mean, the original property is called Grid Gap, right? And then they were like, we should add this to Flexbox, and they're like, let's add Flexbox Gap, and then they're like, nah, let's just call it Gap, and then
Okay.
it becomes impossible to track the two of them, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Um,
And the other
and
thing, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I think Pavel mentioned it, or maybe you mentioned it when I was talking with you, but we don't want to go the JS route as well because we support pretty modern browsers, so it's going to be available soon, probably. So like the effort to do all that, it's not really worth it.
Oh, I mean, I agree. The reason that I asked about that was that if we could pull that off, then we wouldn't have to change the markup. You know, so we
Okay,
could
yeah,
like
yeah,
just keep using the gap property and then
yeah,
and fix it behind the scenes. You know what I mean? Because
This
you're
was
right.
your
Safari is
kind
coming
of
out.
fallback, right? Like your solution for a
This,
yeah,
fallback.
yeah, this was to like allow the author, I mean, allow the person writing the front end code to just keep using gap with Flexbox, and and then it'll work eventually on the rest of the browsers. But
yeah.
I don't know.
I, I, I,
It's again probably more work than it's worth.
I'm just laughing because Chris Demars is like, no one needs JS. I'm
Yeah,
a
no, I
fan
mean,
of the
I
whole front
like
end stack.
Chris and I will fight for
I
this.
yeah, I mean, my instinct to not use JS. I mean, I don't want to use JS if I can avoid it ever, but there's no CSS only solution to this is the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
to
So
finding support for it.
And you may have done this in the issue. I didn't really get to go over everything you guys added since it was in the last like couple of hours. But as we're going through towards this issue that we're going to, what in your mind right now is your solution for this? Is it just changing out so that we don't have gap anymore, or do you have is this like JS JavaScript like solution something that we want to do?
Yeah, no, we talked about it in the issue a little bit, and I think we both agreed, or we all agreed, that the JavaScript sort of top level hacky thing was probably just not, it's just overkill for this problem, you know?
yeah,
And so the solution is really going to be finding each instance of this and fixing it on a case by case basis.
Okay.
So some of the times, so I started, am I still sharing? Yeah. Kind of. I started tracking down where it shows up in the markup, right? So Forem has some utility classes, kind of like Tailwind. So some of the time they show up here, right? So this is one of these flex,
yeah,
gap 2. And this, where's the one that I had? Some of these, I'm like just not quite familiar with enough with the like admin section in the code base to find
yeah.
the
It's kind of a mix of things. So
spot, but I found one that was like,
yeah, you can
yeah,
go.
which is fine, but that's what I mean. It's like kind of spread all over the whole code base. Oh,
That's okay.
session expiring. Oh, that just means I have to log in again.
Maybe it had a debugger going
Anyway,
on.
I'll get that tracked down.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
I think
few
something's
different things going on.
It's not.
Okay. Postgres, come back, baby. Don't leave us. It's too soon.
All right. While he's getting that up, do you want to talk, Nick, about the things going on then?
Yeah. So so there's a few things like Dan was looking for in there. So the admin section. So just to kind of recap the tech stack a bit, for people that might not be familiar with the Forem code base. Forem is primarily a Rails-based application, Ruby on Rails. So we render most things server side. I'm gonna stop for 1 sec. Check if your Postgres database server is running. It's an obvious thing to check, but I would still check it. I don't know why it would have stopped, but
It's not obvious, and also I don't really I don't
So
really know how to do that either. So.
yeah, so this is your web server log going right now. That's normal.
I'm in the same
Uh,
boat,
Mhm,
Dan.
mhm,
That's not
yeah,
obvious. What?
I can see you have the Postgres app. If you click on the little elephant in the top of your Mac toolbar,
mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
and then
So this is what I
and
was
then
saying when I was setting this up. Like I had look at that. I had, oh, is this just, well, anyway, this is
when
my
So
first
it's
time working
going.
with Postgres. And
oh yeah,
um,
and no worries.
what I was saying
we're
was
happy you
with
got it.
the install, I mean, we can just like, you could share if you want or something too, if stops
Yeah.
working, but
Well, we'll just check real quick the Postgres because the error seems pretty clear that it.
here we go.
Okay, so okay, that seems to be running.
I mean, it was, the front end was working is the problem, or not oh, here we go. I just had to like refresh it or something. I don't know.
Okay, it just needed a little
So
love.
I'm just remembering. I just like, yeah, just needed a little something, a little
Just a
hard
little.
refresh.
You can do it.
So what I was saying was I had just tracked down like one of these situations,
Yeah, and it was in the
and I
modal, right?
imagine you could probably point me to where the rest of these show up. But
Yeah,
well,
the because where does it report it in the issue again? Like the initial issue?
uh,
Ooh, don't update Postgres right now.
um, oh, no.
YOLO.
No, what I was saying, oh, we could just pick one. I mean, like, yeah, right.
Sorry.
Um, I lit yeah, I was installing all this stuff
Images.
yesterday and basically lit my desk on fire because my computer got so
Okay.
hot.
Yeah, so this is the
Um,
admin
so
section, site config. I know of a modal in
yeah,
here.
sorry, my computer's just going a little slow.
Oh, that's okay.
Well,
Um,
they're not all in modals is the problem.
okay.
There
If
it
you want
is.
if you want to stop sharing, I'll
So
share, and then you'll probably get a bit of juice
Yeah.
back in your computer.
Yeah. Because
yeah,
you
that's
can
probably
still
that's probably a
navigate
good
inside
call.
of the
Um,
VS Code,
Yeah,
Dan, if he's sharing.
yeah. I can
yeah,
see you've got.
probably a good call. Yeah.
Just let me share my screen. Share your screen.
And for people who haven't contributed, there's a lot of pieces that you have to initially install when you're contributing to a forum. And this the Postgres. What did we decide it was called? Postgres.
Yeah.
Can't even say it
Postgres.
right. Is one of the things you have to have along with a couple other things. So as they're talking about this stuff, it's just stuff you have to have up to be able to start the application to be able to see it.
Yeah, these are kind of like one-time things you set up. It's rare they need to get upgraded. But okay, so you're in the show HTML herb. So herb's just a Ruby template. We've got some markup in here. I think this is yeah, this is being built straight in a Ruby template. Um, if you go back if we go back to the admin page, I'll let's load that up.
So yeah, it's sorry, it
Okay,
is in the
yeah. So the issue is here though, right? Like I'm in show.html.herb. That's where you're at right now.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you
Go to
have
web
the
server.
app open, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So the issue here is he's setting gap 4 here, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I don't know if you have it. I mean, I assume you have it running somewhere, but if you have it in a browser, I can show you where, like, where this is happening.
Yeah. Let me
So,
pull it up.
but like while Nick is loading that, I mean, so what this gap 4 is doing, this is saying flex column and gap 4. The oh, we lost your stream,
No, I'm
Okay.
just I gotta switch.
but
I gotta switch the screen. But go ahead, keep talking.
It's just me.
so well, that field set had children, and so when it was set to column and it was set to gap 4, it's basically adding gap 4 to between each children. So one thing we could do is just add a margin straight to each child. But I'm not a big fan of that if we can avoid it because I mean we have to do it to each one and we have
Yeah.
to like if another one gets added, you have to remember to add it, and remember not to add it to the last one or whatever. So here is one of those. I think this is one of the examples I used in the comments on the issue was here we can really easily just swap this to grid, and it works exactly how we want it to.
We
and
should connect to yours.
I mean, I can, yeah.
Okay, so the solution would be more, instead of trying to find like some kind of fallback, because we know there's not a fallback for this. As far as Flexbox, the solution could be just make this grid, because we know grid gap, grid and then gap it is something that works in Safari.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, that's it, and so this is one of those issues where like areas where it's like murky. It doesn't really fall into that rule very clearly, the layout versus components and, et cetera. And so this is where I like wanted to get some clarification and got clarification, the answer here is just like very simple. I mean, it's like very straightforward. It's even stacked, right? So like lots of times Flex, I think most of the time, if somebody was making this fresh, they would have just reached for grid to begin with. And in fact, I'm pretty sure there are other like very, very similar layouts and in Forem, and it's using gap, so but this is what I mean. Like this issue is just I have to track down everything every time this happens and like make a little decision every time, which is it's all pretty, I mean, I think the decision will be fairly obvious when we actually look at it, but Nick, I have this running again. Do you want me to share, or?
Yeah, go nuts if you got it. I was trying to connect to your server, but it wasn't loading up, so I started to spin up.
All you're sharing right now is just me, giant Christina.
It happened again, Christina. Sorry.
Oh wait, you were trying to connect to. Oh, you were trying to connect to my local host. Is that what you're?
Yeah. Because with the live share,
I haven't used live
share.
You're in my computer.
I'm in your computer. I'm in your head.
I have not used live share before either, so sorry if I did something wrong or configured something.
No. I think the prompt came up, but you were talking, so I just assumed.
Nick's all hack the planet over here.
Yeah. I'm in the Matrix. I've got your credit card. Send me your GameStop shares. I don't know, what all the cool kids are doing these days. All right, cool. So we got the app open.
Yeah. I bought all the shares of Blockbuster I could afford. That was what I was supposed to do, right?
Yeah, I hear it's gonna be big. It's gonna be big.
So this is that screen. This is that screen that we were just looking at the code for. And here's our Flex, column. This is the markup that is generating that page.
Yeah.
And let me know if I'm doing things too quickly or whatever. But in this case, we can change it to grid, and it's just you don't see any change. All right, so I'm sorry, I was going to explain what that was, but you don't see any change because grid by default goes in column order, right?
Yeah.
And flex started with flex, and flex column, flex by default goes horizontally, right? And so we had to add the flex column class. Grid by default, if you don't tell it anything else, you just say display grid, it's just gonna make a bunch of rows and not do anything else. And then so we say display grid and put gap, it'll make a bunch of rows for each of these children, and then stick a gap in between them.
So what this reminds me of, by the way, everyone, it's like when you're doing CSS and you do a whole bunch of CSS, then you go back and you start taking stuff out and you're like, wait, I didn't need that CSS.
It's like delete every CSS class.
Wait,
just add
this is better. Because you're just seeing classes here. This is our design system, but this is adding CSS every time. So instead of having to have, like you said, display flex and then flex column, now all we have to say is display grid, and then you have your grid gap too. So instead of having a bunch of different things, you just have the two there. So optimization, really.
That's right. That's right. It optimization both for the code and also I find it easier to read or whatever. If you can reduce the amount of stuff going on.
Oh yeah, for sure. The less markup we deliver too, the better.
Yeah.
And so I was going to say, all right, so here's your flex. I just refreshed it, so there's no changes yet.
Yeah.
Just to illustrate what Christine was saying, our flex class is here, display flex, and whatever flex
Look at
column,
all those
you know, is
importance.
saying flex direction column. Right. I mean, this is the curse of the utility class,
Yep.
Yeah.
mindset, but like you have to do it. And then so we can just say, okay, grid, and our grid class is just
There we
display
go.
grid. That's all it's doing.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'll
And
just
then here's
mention
our gap.
something too
And
before you go on there, Dan. If people are wondering, oh my God, why
Mhm.
are there all these importance in those utility classes there? There is a reason. It's not because we're irresponsible. It's the the code the code base is open source, and a lot of cooks have been in the kitchen over the years. So uh, there's a lot of stuff where maybe contributors or other uh, folks might have not been aware of like some things in the cascade and stuff, and it's the CSS cascade, sorry. So there's importance littered in the non-utility classes in places, and so as an interim thing, we've added not important to the utility classes. They will get pulled out at some point, but the reason being is just because of that, just in case people are wondering. So
yeah. Well, we don't. I was going to say, I was trying to look it up while you were talking. I feel like it's, I feel like let me see here. I know. I was going to say, I think Tailwind does some of that, but they don't. I think if you're starting to scratch from Tailwind, then there's no important. But yeah, if you're mixing utility classes and other
Bootstrap
CSS,
had a
that you
lot
almost
of
have to.
importance.
yeah.
I remember that.
Right, because yeah, and
Yeah.
like, and it's because of the same thing. If
Yeah.
even if you're just using even if you're just using their styles, they need to be able to override their own. Like if you have a card, but you want this card to have a margin, whatever. Anyway, um, don't be embarrassed by the importance. They're
Oh no,
they
I'm
need
not
to.
embarrassed. It
Um,
was more to let people know in case they were wondering. Like,
I'm just used to like when I'm talking about my own code, I'm like, all right, listen, everybody, before I get the emails, I know that this is not ideal. Anyway, just a shout out real quick to the Firefox dev tools. They have these really awesome like layout things to help. So you hit this
yeah,
grid, it'll show you when things are grid, and if you click it, um, it'll show you, it'll like illustrate. So here's our gaps here, and
Yeah, you can
we
add
can do
grid
that.
names and
This is a
grid
very simple
lines.
grid, so there's not a lot
Wonderful.
going on. Yeah, exactly. There's
yeah,
nothing going on fancy in this one, but still, it's even then it's helpful. The
yeah,
other, like the alternative solution would be to remove all of this stuff and add margins either to the crayons field class or uh, specifically like add a margin, class name to each of these, like this one.
yeah. That's kind of one of the nice things I like about the grid gap, because
Actually,
like I think you mentioned in the issue, but like the last child or like the first child, where well in the case of this issue, I think it was just the last child. You just want to say don't put don't put a margin on that last one because it's the last one. But
right.
grid gap avoids that because you have the border. No,
Yep.
you have the margin which handles the exterior, I believe, in the grid, right? And then the gaps
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Totally. Exactly. You're exactly right. And the other nice thing about that is once you get into multiple dimensions, right? The like it's not just last child anymore, right? Like if this
yeah,
was a 2x2 grid, you have to not add margin bottom to like the last two children or whatever. If it was a 3x3, and that becomes a lot like Flexbox. Lots of times you're just throwing a bunch of stuff into it and letting it lay out where it goes, right?
yeah,
And so it becomes impossible to predict you know how many don't need the margin bottom thing.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
anyway,
Yeah.
um, so I meant to, so we can actually make this change, I guess. But I meant to look up how we should be committing this stuff or whatever. But
Oh, don't worry
whatever. I
about
don't know
that.
that we need to get into it right now. So I don't know.
Are
So
you
that's one,
wondering if you should be
like that's
committing it
one.
as like, hey, I should put this one in because I just made a change and then go back
Yeah,
and make another
I
change?
guess I was just more wondering if I should be
Yeah.
bothering committing this in the middle of the stream, or if we should just move on.
It's up to you, but in terms of
Um,
it brings up a good point though about the forum code base is everybody writes commits different and stuff, but at the end of the day, whenever somebody's PR gets merged, it gets squashed. So, if you go all meticulous, I mean, it's still helpful, some people are super meticulous with each commit, but at the end of the day, it's going to get squashed and you're going to just have this one long commit message, which is concatenated all of them. So, um, I don't know if that's what you were getting at or if it was more just like, should I
Right,
commit now?
exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. No, just like guidelines in general, all that stuff. But the question in my brain was really, should I bother with it right now? So yeah, I mean, I basically just did a search. Am I coming through okay again?
Yeah, yeah.
So I basically just did a search in the code base to try to track these down. I think I don't think any of these exist without a dash. So I kind of just was, I don't know what is going on with the search, but let's get back up to the top. My computer's clunging down again. Find in folder, and then I said yep, and that's how I found all
Okay.
of these ones.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, so
this is
move all
another
all
one.
the gap dashes potentially to grid gap.
Um,
Well, some of
well,
them are
that's
grid,
like,
and then the ones
Okay,
we
I
need to
see.
change
Yeah,
are the flex
oh, there's
ones,
more
right?
there's actually more in this file. I forgot
Yeah,
about
there
that.
is.
So there's more
There.
in this actual file.
okay, gotcha.
So all right, so where are we now? Started body container is um somewhere. Get started body container, and then oh, it's just more field sets. I'm just trying to find the ones
Yeah,
that we've maybe I actually fixed the wrong one. It's possible.
yeah, because I think the field sets use crayons. Oh no, it's okay. No, it is grid gap there. Okay, yeah.
I'm just letting this refresh so I can make sure our changes got applied. Yeah, they did. So that's cool. So we got that one. So I'm just trying. This is me just trying to figure out where this is in on that
Uh,
page, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
good.
yeah,
So
These take investigation,
um,
investigative work.
yeah.
We're good.
It, yeah, no, it brings up another point. I forgot to mention at the start of the pairing stream, but uh, you know, the these the pairing streams aren't like scripted in the sense that like it's gonna be a perfect path and everything's gonna be fixed. It's like this is really like I like to treat these like how I really work, It's like you're looking up stuff, we might Google stuff, read through some things, some trial and error. So it's you know, I don't want to say it's real life because that sounds a little too dramatic, but
The real deal.
yeah, yeah.
this is real life.
Yeah.
Well, let me see if I can. I think it's here. I think this is this.
Dan, this
Um,
is a programming test, and
uh,
we're testing you, and if
Yeah,
oh
you
no.
get this right,
yeah. How many golf balls are in California? I don't know. Sorry, I was just doing
That's kind of like one
random.
of the worst. How many golf balls are in California?
Yeah,
Don't
those.
distract me because then I'll just start thinking about it.
I
What
hate
I
those
was
questions.
going to say was something. Yeah. Yeah,
The
me too. I mean, well, I don't know. That's the problem is they're interesting, but like if the answer is not clear, then
Yeah, exactly.
Um, the problem is I'm streaming, and so like my computer is just lagging just a little bit, and it is
hmm
interrupting my like I scroll, and then it scrolls, and
yeah.
Okay,
it's
okay.
like it makes it a little harder to just connect my thoughts together. But so what I want to do is find this. That's what I want to do. Yeah, no, no. There it is. All right. So
Okay.
what's this?
Okay, that's card
Oh, it's the whole thing.
header. Okay, it's the card class. Is it the card class you mean that's Oh no, it's the get started header card. Yeah, because if we look at
I'm just
that.
tracking this down. All right. So wait. That's this. Oh, getting started body container. I'm trying to find this field set is what I'm trying to find.
Mm.
This field set
It,
has the flex and the gap for, right?
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And it's like a list of
so
field sets.
it could be that because if you go back to the herb template in the editor, uh, I only know this because I've been in the admin area recently. So it's gonna loop through
Hmm.
each one, I believe here. So I think there's a for loop above that form creation, or maybe it's, or is this one specific to? Because I know because like a lot of the admin area looks the same, like they're all panels, and there's a loop somewhere that generates them, so it's like repeated. I started speaking French there, sorry. Um,
Oh, I had the wrong one selected anyway. So here's our form.
okay,
It's all right. So here it is.
okay, so we want to switch that one to grid 2, I guess.
This is the same. This is going to be the same thing. Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
All right. So we're just going to do that. We didn't even need to test that one because grid. No. And there's just a bunch in this one. So we can kind of, well, I think the rest of them are, all right. So here's one. This is why this issue is kind of like interesting but also a little hard to track down is,
yeah, it's like whack-a-mole.
searching for gap will find us all the uses of gap, but we have to like, since these can come in different orders, we can't just search for flex space gap dash, right? Because that
Yeah,
wouldn't find these ones. And so we kind of just need to, exactly. We just need to like track each one down. Okay. So this is
we could
actually container. Um,
we could try a regex search to
I
make
mean,
it a little easier. I don't know if
yeah, I
it'll.
mean, it's most of the files like don't have a ton of. So when I was doing the search, most of the files did not have a bunch, right? And so I just
Mm-hmm.
eyeballed them, and you can
Okay.
just see usually, right? It's just like this one has flex, this one has flex, this one has flex, this one has grid, like, and most of the files don't have a bunch of them in there, so it's really not like I don't know. I mean, like you could try to regex, but I still wouldn't trust it. I would still like just do this anyway. To
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like just
still
find them
going through
all
it.
and put my eyes on each one. Yeah. So I was just gonna move on to this one. So this is allow email password. I don't know,
Yeah.
registration. This is
And
just a setting somewhere in here, I think.
yeah, they're all panel. There,
Uh,
there's some
like off
accessibility.
the top.
Yeah, there's the emails one maybe. There's some accessibility issues in here too, but I'm only mentioning that because like the show info thing, like that could be a details HTML element, but it's not at the moment. But we're going to be
Yeah.
reworking the whole admin area, so I don't think we're uh, going to change that right now. But yeah, which one are you looking for? It's the email. Trying to see new site
Yeah. It's
config.
here's
It's probably this one with like the yo
right.
at
You're
dev
right. It's
2.
started.
Yeah, yeah, it should be it.
Well, this is just another one of those. Probably all of these in this, at least in this file, we can just change. What I was
Yeah,
trying to track down was this one. So this is,
flex gap
and because this
2.
this seems like a different layout, right? So like the gap 4 ones, at least in this file, I think we can probably just safely change them all. But I just wanted to kind
Yeah,
of tackle
the
a
other one there
different
too.
layout situation. And so this is email auth settings section. Is that where so um
It should be, if it's not
I
there,
don't know.
if you go to there's another panel called authentication, and there's email settings in there. Um, the
That
other thing you
seems
could do too
that
is you
seems
could, if for some reason yeah, it's the second one. If you open, if you, I don't know, it's email address. The other thing too is you can actually do if you do a search in the dev tools, in the markup panel or the inspect elements panel, you can actually
yeah.
do a search in there. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to see, because the whole auth
Um
section is, there is email there, but this one was talking about enable email registration. Was that it? Uh,
yeah.
allow email password. Yeah, that should just be the email address that you see there with the email icon or the letter icon.
To enable or disable. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I think it's just that.
Yep, I see flex on it.
Yeah, flex.
Where are we at? Running a little behind. Flag.
Yeah, we're from the future. Okay. Yeah, that's a button. I hope that's a button. Um, yeah, config. Yeah, it's a flex item for sure. Okay. Yeah, there's a bit of a lag on your thing there, but open that.
Yeah.
That's
So this
Yeah,
is
it's got
flex.
hidden. All right.
gap.
So wait, where is it?
Yeah,
You can see it's got the gap.
yeah. Baby got a gap.
Oh, I need to disable invite only mode. That's what it is.
Oh yeah, that's yeah, that's password email registration. Yeah. Yeah, so you got to
Yeah, I
check
don't know.
that off.
I guess if I'm lagging a little bit, and then
You should still be able to see the markup though.
do
What
well,
does
the
it say?
markup's in here, but I can't get it. Well, I guess it's just hidden.
Okay. Yeah, if you check off invite only mode, then you have to go in the confirmation area at the bottom there.
I'm just showing it.
Okay.
So,
Oh yeah.
um,
That's like getting past the paywall on news sites. Power move. Power move.
right. Power move. That's right. And so here's all right. So here is our little, okay. So this one is, we're in the case where there's only one button anyway.
Okay.
This sort of anticlimactic. Here's another power move, right? So, yeah. All right. If I'm lagging really bad, I apologize. It's hard for me to tell. But
There's a bit of a
this is
lag,
one of
but
the
it's good.
situations I found a few of these where, yeah, where it was a flex container with basically buttons, and a gap property added to it. And so this is one of those times where it's a little less straightforward to just apply grid, right? Because if we just applied grid, then they would like go into a column layout, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a couple different ways to go about this. We can use grid, and so basically here, there's basically two solutions here. You guys can see the buttons and everything at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Undo,
It's hard.
undo.
I'm not sure if my audio is syncing up with my cursor or not, but
Yeah, you're good.
these two buttons are sitting next to each other, right? So it probably was hard to tell, but I just stuck this markup in here to test this.
Yeah.
But right now we have two buttons, Flexbox and the gap property, right? And so that's what's giving us this nice space here. If we added a bunch more buttons, it would just behave exactly how you expect, right? So this gap would be stuck in between them. The problem is when you go to Safari, you're basically seeing it as if there was, no gap at all, and
Okay.
they're just crammed up next to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the two possible solutions in this case, right? Because so gap, grid, we can use grid, or we can just add margins, right? So like those are the two.
Yeah.
Basically, those are the two solutions. The margin thing is very easy and straightforward, but you do need to make sure that you only apply it to the right ones.
Yeah.
The other issue is let me see what I mean, I was just wondering about wrapping in this situation, but if they were to wrap, and this thing had margin left and like this wrap to the next line, it would be stuck over a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's these margin utility classes, right? So what is our gap to, I guess? So that gives us our margin here. And that looks fine, right?
Yeah.
And it's probably just fine for this situation. If you were going to add a bunch of buttons and expect it to wrap, right? That's when this would, let me see if I can just,
Yeah.
well, All right, so there's two pieces
You
of
could
this, right?
probably,
So Flex, you need to tell Flexbox to wrap by default. I mean, it doesn't wrap by default, so you need to tell it to wrap. And then if you did, and this popped down, then at that point, the second button would be popped over to the right a little bit.
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, kind of as if we just did this. Oh no, that's not it because those are buttons. But regardless, what do we call that? Flex column.
Yeah, I think it's just flex
Mhm.
call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
It's
not a
bumped
good
over.
illustration exactly, but you can still see
Yeah,
it
you
popping
can see
over.
it.
You
It's
know,
bumped over. Yeah.
Yeah.
right. So what we can do here is instead of the margin issue, um, so let me just remove this if I can. We can say, let's use grid and grid. So this is me trying to, so there's a property called Autoflow. All right, I'm going to do it by styles and then I can remember because I actually checked and the utility classes do exist.
Okay.
But I don't remember what they are off the top of my head.
Mhm.
So
I don't either.
we can say, so by default, the grid autoflow. So this is what I was talking about with these other ones. By default, grid autoflows to, in like by creating rows. And so what we want to do is have it create columns instead, right? So that gives us our side by side, and then our, and then we want like basically by default it will, whoops, columns. By default it will. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I thought I had this covered. So this is where I'm just like,
Column
this is where I'm
dense.
trying to remember.
I was not aware of column dense. I did not know that.
Yeah, this is where I was like, this is where I don't always remember off the top of my head about the way that I set this up, and I set it up yesterday just to see if it would work, and it did. And so what we want to do here is say, we want to tell grid to just like stick stuff in there, and we want to say, we basically want to say, it can just be as small as it needs to be. But I cannot remember off the top of my head. Now this is like,
Is it with the min max you're
I'm gonna have to
thinking?
look it up on. I don't think we need min max. I wish that I had saved that because I had knocked this down. And so every time this happens, right? So this is like, we're just gonna go through the things that I try, right? And so this is, we want auto fill, and then we want something, right? And this is the part that I can never remember. So the place that I usually go for this sort of thing is grid. Grid by example has some really cool stuff. If
I
you
linked
checked
that
out the
earlier,
site, I would.
everyone.
Is
And
that
Awesome.
Rachel?
Yeah.
Yeah, that okay. That is
Um,
Rachel Andrews'
yeah.
site. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
yes, it is. And just a ton of like very straightforward examples, right? Plus
Mhm.
the like best part about this site is these illustrations.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because you don't always know exactly, like I can, you don't always remember exactly what the syntax is or whatever, but
Yeah.
you do kind of know in your head what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
And one of these is called, all right, so we had Autoflow, which we
I'm
nailed
trying to spot it.
down. Then it
Is it
was
is it grid auto placement?
grid auto columns is, I'm pretty sure what I want. Max content. There it is. And then we can have our gap.
Okay.
Well, I don't remember what this was.
2.
Just add the gap
It
class,
was
I
2.
guess, but
Yeah.
it's 2. Yeah.
And
Gap
the
gap
max content
2.
takes the max size of what the content is, like the undo text and stuff, right? Because that's available in other. You can use that elsewhere
Yeah.
too.
Yes. So max content will basically like whatever kind of element. So this is an inline block element, these buttons. And so it's sort of similar to I don't know. I think in this case, min content and max content will line up similarly. It's basically like, do the maximum that this thing is ever going to take. Like that is how big
Yeah.
this column is. And here there's not a big difference, especially here because the buttons are exactly the same, right? And we
Mhm.
don't expect these to wrap, but actually it is safe for wrapping. If we wrapped these, the problem here in the sort of the difference between Flexbox and Grid, it's not a problem, but like the main difference between Flexbox and Grid in this situation, this thing that we have set up here, this will work really well, and they'll even wrap and it won't break, right?
Yeah.
The difference in behavior will be that these will line up in columns if there's a whole bunch of them and they're different sizes. They'll still be in a grid, right? In columns. And if it's flex, it'll be more like words, like more of like a paragraph, where
Yeah.
the different size ones
Yeah,
will,
we
be
could
different.
copy the inner
Um,
HTML there and paste a few, maybe add a few more
and
buttons, maybe.
that's what I was just getting to. Um,
Real live demos happening now.
oh yeah. All right. So here's
We need to do
actually
more of these pairings with
this. I
CSS
might have
because
actually
then I
led you
actually enjoy them.
because
I'm like, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
all right. No, this is a good call because there's another piece missing here about wrapping because it's not it's
Oh
not
yeah,
wrapping,
it's not
right? This
wrapping
is
right. Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
right. And so there's another piece that we need to add to this, I think, if we wanted to go this way. This is one of those things where like, especially since it's in little spots all like kind of spread out through the code base, I don't even know if I would do this,
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's not easy to really explain, and it's a bunch of classes that we'd have to remember every time or whatever. I think I might be more inclined to just add margins, for these buttons. It's just like buttons, right? It's just like they're just buttons, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but and I'm trying to remember what the um, I know there's a piece to this where we can tell it to wrap at a certain point, Can't remember what it is really.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I'm gonna Google
Maybe
it.
it is. Maybe it's repeat. The problem is with all right, so the problem with all right, grid
Can't you just do, isn't
and
it like repeat auto
uh
1FR or max?
well, one of our will
Oh no,
um
that'll take as much space, never mind. Right?
right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's auto fit and auto
So
fill. Which
repeat
one were you using?
whichever is the one that makes more sense. I can never remember. One of the
Yeah.
one of them
I think auto fit makes
will
it go.
will
I
smash
think,
them
yeah, I think auto fit
and
does.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. The name. Oh, masonry. Well, that's another
all
thing.
right,
If
so I was going to try a min-max thing, right? And so min content. The problem is that min-max won't take two like strangely like hard to calculate values, right? So min-max requires basically a
yeah,
hard stop on one of them or the other. And this is mm, I'm just like trying to now I'm mad because I know I had this actually nailed down, but it was still I was looking at it and it was like too complicated for this thing, but it's me just I'm always just trying to like, okay, what is like the coolest way I can solve this problem sometimes.
Mhm.
No.
yeah, yeah,
Um uh,
but
but in general, as a if I saw a bunch of this stuff come in from a maintainer's perspective with a bunch of fancy stuff for a simple thing, I would almost certainly say, why
Can
don't
you
we
make
just use
it
margin here
margin?
instead?
Yeah.
Right. Especially because this view, I mean, we were doing this stuff to illustrate some things. This view um, is not like we just kind of know it's never going to run into this situation with 100 buttons,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, the, the and honestly, another solution for this specific, see, I don't want to refresh because we had to do so much to get to it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
another solution for this specific problem, right, is let me get back to my view here. Okay, so if we say, all right, so our buttons are display block by default. Is that what it is?
They should be
Oh no, we
inline
still have
by
grid on it.
default.
Yep.
Sorry, no,
You have
no,
grip
no,
on.
no. I
You
still
have
have grid.
grid
Yeah,
on them.
yeah.
Exactly.
Display
So
grip. Oh, yeah.
we could
Yeah.
exactly. Since these are inline blocked, like we can just have spaces, and we could do some word spacing or something, and make the line height bigger, and just like space them out. Um, Via that, the problem there is that you have to make sure there's an actual literal space between
Yeah.
button.
Yeah.
Right. So in my copy and pasting, I like the yeah, you can see these ones don't have a space, but then if
Yeah.
there you go.
And
Right.
and
And so
another
like this is it, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say another thing too with Flex that doesn't support the gap right now is Flex out of the box, like they would be stuck on the bottom. You'd have to handle bottom margins too, except for like the last row. Like whereas with the grid gap with the grid, like that's just all managed out of the box. Did I say that right?
Yeah, wait, can you say that again?
Like
No, I'm
if
not
this
sure. Sorry.
like if this was Flex right now with the assumption that the grid gap's not supported, like Flex out of the box, like if you added margins there, you would also have to handle bottom margins because as it wraps they
Yeah.
would stick together too, so it's like uh, yeah, it
Mhm.
they just let's grid everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I mean like that's why margins are a pain, and that's why the gap property is so cool, and like it's so exciting, honestly. From like, I mean, I've been writing CSS for a long time, and the gap is like one of those things where like it's just where have you been all my life?
Yeah, yeah,
Because those
Really,
margin
we all
things are
just
is
need to be
like
like
such a pain.
Safari, like we always do as developers, just complain about the browser until maybe they
yeah,
implement
yeah.
the
Yeah,
change.
yeah,
No, I think
exactly.
I think Jen Simmons is at
Definitely.
Apple now working on
yeah, she is.
Safari.
Yeah, so I think there's like a change in the wind over there, Her,
Yeah, it's gonna happen soon. She's there.
yeah,
It's good.
Um, Yeah, no, that's good, and like they need it, right? Because Safari's having this problem, and Apple's not a browser company. Well, I mean, I guess neither is Google, but
yeah.
I understand how it happens. It's not like their highest priority, but
Google's a
anyway, I
reCAPTCHA.
just added those characters.
How
Right,
many how many
right.
traffic lights in
So
there?
here, right, right. But anyway, like this is another like very low-fi solution. The wrapping thing you have to add. I mean, I just adjusted the word spacing and the line height, and now we have like
Mhm.
buttons. There's no flex or grid, I don't know. It's just another
Yeah.
approach. But
Yeah,
in this case, if you look at the code, it's like there's literally always either only one button or two buttons in
Mhm.
this specific view.
yeah.
So
Uh,
we we don't even need to handle every case, at all. We can just add, the margin here
yeah,
into this
yeah.
one and
I was
don't
gonna
even need to
say
worry about the
too,
rest of them.
if you have like 20 buttons side by side, you probably want to check out the UX of that too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got some other
I
issues
think we got a
probably
Yeah,
you should track
problem.
down.
Yeah.
unless it's a cash register or calculator, but
I think at some point someone didn't tell no one no with some features or something. They wanted an admin like, no, this is
yeah, yeah. Just add another button. Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't. Are we scheduled for an hour? Or are we wrapping up? Or I can't even remember what time we said we would.
We
If we
we
want to keep
usually
going,
book
or
it till 2:30, so we still got time, and we got quite a few
oh, nice.
people in this stream too, so we can keep chatting. And I know you were going through all that, and it's kind of like over engineered for that particular situation, but it's still interesting to go through these things, like
Mhm.
seeing these things
Yeah,
in action. Like I know myself, like I've done a lot of Flexbox, but I still haven't done a ton of grid myself. Like I've done it minimally. So it's just kind of nice seeing all this stuff.
yeah.
I find it pretty cool.
I love it. I mean, I love CSS Grid.
Me too.
And there's some very very cool things you can do with it. We started talking about the min max function a little bit,
Yeah,
and there's it's hard. Like what we were doing was trying to just turn grid into flexbox, so like it makes sense that it's not easy because that's not what it was designed for, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of really cool applications of it, and you can actually do a lot of things and remove like media queries and stuff like that from your workflow in certain situations because
Yeah.
so I just did this for for instance, like a card layout, right? So if you picture just a bunch of cards, I mean, we've seen that on a bunch of sites, right? And
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's a good example of this somewhere because it's not like an original idea. But it's something like this where it's it is a grid, right? It's a grid of cards, right? And so in the before a grid was an option, at different browser sizes, you would want to have, different amounts, like different amount of cards across a row, and the sizes would be different. You want the sizes to be different, stuff like that. And so what you do is, uh, before you do a media query, so you're like under 800 pixels, just only do 2 cards across. Under 1200 pixels, 3 or 4 cards,
Yeah.
whatever, stuff like that, right?
Media
And
query. Yeah.
Yeah.
right, exactly. And you can actually do that sort of layout in I don't know if she has a good example of it here, but in grid without any media queries, because so let's just find her min-max example and a simple min-max example.
She
This is
had
always
one
just, I mean,
called a
this is going to be
simple
one of
min
those.
max. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just trying to figure out if that was too simple for what I was trying to describe. But the I'm sorry, I don't even remember what I was saying. So when you're laying out a grid, I'm just trying to think of the best way to illustrate this. But when you're laying out a grid, you assign it. This is so hard to like talk without my. um, you you say, all right. So I'm gonna go here. This is not gonna be perfect, but
It's okay. People are
display
appreciating the CSS talk, so go for it.
Yeah. Shout out to
and
Tanlan.
excellent. Well, I
Oh, it's Chris
good because
Bolas,
CSS
sorry,
is
in the
like
stream.
my favorite.
Okay. Hey, Chris.
Oh,
Sorry,
nice.
I don't know what some people's handles are on Twitch, so I'm just like, oh, hello, random person. But it's somebody from Virtual Coffee. So shout out to Chris Bolas. I don't know if I'm saying your name right.
What's up? What's up, Virtual Coffee? Screw template. So columns, right? And so the old way to do this is to say, so this is like at this layout, do 4 columns, right?
Yeah.
And then the problem is, when your display gets smaller, then we say, okay, under
Do
that,
2 of
just do
them.
2 or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And so grid has a repeat thing, repeat day. I keep doing this, I don't know why. And so here you can say repeat 4 times and 1 part. And so this is the same thing we did before, except that it's just nicer, right? And so that's that's like step 2 is media queries, except just change this value, right? And then what you can do is say auto fill or auto fit. So auto fit and auto fill, one of them basically makes, except one frame is like, is that frame? Fraction. One fraction, except
Oh,
one
is that what it stands
fraction.
for? I couldn't remember what the
Yeah,
FR
I'm pretty
standed for.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And so autofit does this, autofill does, I think when we have a locked down thing, it's going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But so this is saying when the container is, I mean, basically put as many 100 pixel columns as will fit, right?
Yeah.
So here we get 5. If we made this a little bigger, 6 would pop, like the 6th one would pop up.
Yeah.
Which actually gets us a long way for our responsive problems, right? So you can see, hopefully you can see it popping down to 4 right there. The problem here is that, so except that they're all just 100 pixels and they're all locked into that, right? And so here, yeah, it popped up to 6, but it's not like they're not stretching out, they're not like filling the space. It's a little, not as great. And so another thing we can do is say min-max, and min-max is this whole other function that says basically pick some value between this minimum and this maximum. And so we can say, we can say minimum 200 pixels go up to 1 fraction, right? And so what this does is it says like we're not going to let these things get any much smaller than 200 pixels, but like with the extra space, fill it up, go all the way. Let's see if this changes because I can never remember exactly where. Change.
And no media
queries. Just tell me
what
I can't remember what autofit. Right. No media queries.
Do you want me to tell you real quick what autofit and autofill are? Just because I have the a little thing up here, I can just say it real quick if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay. When using autofill, the items will grow once there's no space to place empty tracks. When using autofit, the items will grow to fill the remaining space. Because of all the empty tracks, will be collapsed down to 0 pixels. So there's like a little bit of a difference. You can see some good example. I linked a thing that from Stack Overflow where you can see the examples for people who want to know more about it. But yeah.
Nice. Was that on what? I don't have the Twitch stream open, but which site was that on? CSS Tricks or?
It was actually a Stack Overflow thing. Someone was explaining.
Oh, Stack Overflow. Yeah. So I mean, that's obviously a very good explanation. CSS Tricks has a really great all about grid page, and the MDM. Yes, exactly. And the MDN site is also another one of my references. But we were talking earlier about just starting to use grid and get used to it and stuff. And as you can tell, like I have with grid, I'm like very much still in the like I have to look things up every time I try to do anything more than a tiny bit complicated, So I'm at the point now where I like remember a lot of things are popular, like possible, but I need to like tweak around. I always need to look at everything up.
I have to Google
it too. I can't remember who said it. It was either Rachel Andrew or Jen Simmons, but we were talking about they're talking about like when grid first came out, it's completely new syntax. So it's not like people shouldn't feel bad about having to look these. I've taught several courses on CSS grid. I still look up all the stuff almost every time just because it's like it's new syntax.
Yeah, and I don't use it every day, so I have to Google it because it's not, I mean, there's some stuff like I just never have to because it's like on repeat at this point. But there's I forget what's there's the syntax when you do like 1/2, for example, in the grid. I think is that for the rows or I can't remember. Again,
you can do it for both.
Rows and columns. So that's applying it to individual children, so what we're doing here, I mean, that's there's a whole, the grid is like sort of complicated, it's a new like paradigm really for laying things out, and so there's a lot of things involved, and there's like simple things and I don't know, more complex pieces of it. But what's really happening?
Implicit grid and an explicit grid, which is
exactly where I was. Exactly. That we're basically when we do this, we're just kind of, well, here we're actually telling it what to do, but I mean the grid will kind of do what the grid will do. And then so you can get very specific, you can get very like do this sort of thing, you can say I don't know, fill it up, and then to individual children you can actually like tell it to land on different columns or whatever. So grid grow, so that's like, what am I trying to do here? Oops.
The ways you can make a lot of the really like, so a lot of people, a lot of designers and developers really wanted to have kind of like those magazine layouts or like that newspaper layout, and the grid like made that possible for people. You can be like, no, I want this thing like up over in this corner, I want this over in this corner. When grid first came out, I went crazy with that. I was like, yes, try all kinds of things. But so make it much more simpler for your life too.
I actually just did a kind of fun thing.
Are you missing a T in there?
Still I'm missing just I just didn't
It's
spell
Yeah,
it
Gorton.
even
Yeah,
close to
I
well.
thought he was looking for
I was
viruses
just
for a
like,
sec.
I had this moment where I was like, why isn't that autofilling? Like, why isn't that like finding the thing I'm trying to type? And it was because I just wasn't even spelling it anywhere close to correct. But anyway, I just did a kind of interesting thing with grid here. And so these cards are grids, right? Each one of these cards, like the whole thing is, I think, a grid too. But
Okay, yeah.
the layout here, so we have, so this is at, I can turn on the our little responsive tool here, but the layout, the layout for this card changes depending on. Here I'm still using media queries because it was a little tough to track down, but
Yeah.
I've lost my spot in inspector because it's resizing things. Basically, the problem that I was having with layout in this situation was that at different views, I wanted, so I have this area, I had like the photo and the body, and I wanted them to be, it was like too like scrunched up in responsive thing is, let's say, is that big enough? There we go.
Yeah.
Was like having problems, and so let me find a good example. So here it's like the body is popping down, right? So I can say our grid. So this is like another one of those like really cool things about CSS grid, right? Is that I let me find the right piece of grid template columns, right? So this is like,
Yeah, with the
where is
fractions there.
my, oh, I might have,
I can see what you got there.
um yeah. So the different areas are like, yeah, here's what we were trying to talk about, right? So like at different breakpoints, basically this is saying, okay, this image right now, it's saying I'm in this grid row, I'm like only in row 1, but I'm spanning 2 rows, right? And at a different breakpoint, that is not the case, right? But the body is saying, okay, I'm actually in the first column, but I'm spanning 2, or the second row, but I'm spanning 2 columns.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I did it with, I think I did it with media queries and stuff, but it's kind of, I don't know. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do. There's a cool thing with grid
Media
areas too.
objects typically, and they're a big pain in the butt to do, but with grid they're so much nicer. Like these little, where you have a card where you have like an image on one side and then you have like the details. If people don't know, these are typically called like media objects, and you can find, like, I used to do these with Flexbox because I had like found some like good ways to do it, but once grid came out I was like, grid all the way for the media
Yeah,
objects.
totally. Well, but the media object thing, like traditionally has media and then the body, right? And so like that was where I started for sure. And then I realized I wanted to split them out. So like we have a header and a body, you know. And grid allows us to kind of, I don't know, do some cool stuff with that. But it's
Yeah.
nice to be able to lean into modern browsers and sort of leave some other ones behind, because we can, like, I don't have to think about the fallbacks for all this stuff. Anyway, there's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah,
Again, could
there's
talk about grid
even
for a long
there's
time because
like
it's just like so neat.
yeah, one of the first things I discovered was the grid template areas. That's kind of neat too, where but it
Yes,
where
yes.
you can name like the
We
specific.
should just have you on for a walkthrough Wednesday one time,
Yeah,
and we
yeah,
can just geek out on CSS grid.
yeah. We'll
I,
call you
I,
Mr. Grid.
anybody who wants to listen to me talk about it, this is my problem, is that,
I do.
nobody around ever
All
does.
right,
So
you've already got buy-in. Christina said yes, so you have to come back.
yeah, my 4-year-old's just like, I mean, Daddy, I don't care about CSS grid. When is the Transformers time?
As like, does your 4-year-old call you Dan? It's like, Dan,
No,
you
yeah,
know,
well,
it's enough grid.
this is a
Where's my breakfast?
context switching issue. Yeah. Um, he no, it's funny. Well, whatever. Now I can talk about my kids for hours too. So, you know,
Yeah.
Kids.
we don't have to get into that. But yeah, the
That's a
names, him
good
figuring out
good
the names and
segue.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
it was
no,
funny.
speaking of context switching, I said something too the other day. Somebody was asking me what happened to that, and I said, "Oh, it got deleted." And I was and like, but it wasn't computer related, and it was just they were looking at me kind of funny. But yeah, I don't know. But um, we're
Grid
I'm honest.
area is my favorite.
Is that the
He's doing
same as
grid
the
area.
grid template
Yep.
areas? Okay, yeah.
It's where
Oh
you
yeah,
like
that's what.
you name your areas, grid template area, you like name what you want to do, and then you can just be like, well, this needs to go
No,
into
it's
A or B or whatever you name it. Like I typically
I
name
think
them
it's
something like
template dash areas.
I do talk to my
areas.
kids about CSS. Sorry, someone in the chat said talk to your kids about CSS. My oldest
Yeah,
likes me to talk about, she wants to do the CSS images I used to do. Uh, and so I talk to her about CSS, but she's the only
that's
That's
one.
awesome.
awesome.
The other kids don't care.
Maybe that's a good way to
Um,
practice for interviews. Just talk to your kids. I don't know.
Yeah,
yeah,
they do ask some hard-hitting questions, so.
Yeah, it's true.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, I don't know. It's
yeah.
still just one of those things where I'm just like talking about something, and he just is like very clearly doesn't want me to keep talking anymore.
He's like,
Let's
yeah,
talk
I'm
about
gonna
the things
ignore
I
you
want to
now. Yeah.
do. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I used to drive mine crazy because before I would do courses, a lot of times I would like talk out whatever I was going to do and I would just do it out loud and my kids would be around and they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm not talking to you. I'm just
Yeah.
talking. I just have to talk about these things.
Mommy's talking
Don't
to
worry about
herself.
it.
Oh man.
Oh man.
Th- th-
Anyway,
this
so the
is
rest of this issue is just like I'm just gonna commit this with all these buttons. Is that's cool, right?
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I'll
I just
push
want
it
to see
to
how
production later.
that will be like, what's happening?
Which undo? Which one?
Uh,
Undo long or undo? I don't know. Yeah,
well, the undo longs are shorter than the regular undos, so you know.
it's true. It's true. Yeah, it just takes a little longer. It's true. It's kind of like the Google beer goggles.
All right, I'm gonna
Um,
rein us in.
yeah,
So
I
we
know.
have like we have like 5 more minutes, and I do want to kind of just summarize, and you all can summarize what we've done. I will say my piece first, and then you all can go on. So, Dan had got this issue from our repo, from our Forem repo, where we had this problem. See, we were using Flex Box on a lot of areas, and we were trying to use Gap, which you can now use with Flexbox, but it's not supported in Safari. It's supported along with display grid. You can do display grid gap and then grid gap, but you could not do the Flexbox like we had it. And so he is having to go through kind of wherever we have it and come up with like a solution. So it's not the same with everywhere that we've done it. One of the solutions was just to turn it to grid, and that was good. This one we've been talking through on a bunch of different ways you could go about it, but maybe here margin's probably the better answer as far as these buttons. And so that's what he'll continue doing for this issue. But go ahead, Dan or Nick, if you want to say anything
Damn,
else
that was
about
a
this.
really good summary. That was. I'll let Dan talk if he
For
has
once,
anything
I
else
can
to
summarize these.
add.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't really have anything to add to that other than it's just like usually my brain always wants to go to like the fanciest solution or how can we do this the
Yeah.
coolest way or whatever, and sometimes that works
Okay.
out, and I like thinking. I don't like beat myself up about thinking through it, but usually I'll work through it and then realize it's not just not ideal, and lots of times
Yeah.
the easiest solution is going to be the right one. Especially on a big open source project.
Yeah, for
The
sure.
Yeah, if it's
ease
your
of
own,
explaining
if
what's
it's
going
your own
on.
like
Yeah.
portfolio and you just want to show off your code, you're like, I'm
Right.
gonna go with the fanciest thing.
Right.
Yeah, I don't mean to
Right.
brag,
Right.
but
Right.
check out my
Exactly.
template areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to talk about ridiculous like CSS grid, my portfolio, I have this one
Yeah,
section where it's like I've put like things into all kinds of like little places because I wanted to be cool, and then I got like the media queries
yeah.
because I had to
To,
like
Yeah.
make it responsive. Yeah,
let
Yeah.
me tell you about
I
my
wouldn't do
grid
that
gap.
on a
Yeah.
regular
So that's
site.
it.
No,
And
that's
well, the other
awesome.
side of this, excuse me. The other side of this that we didn't even touch was there's some of the instances of this happening, but excuse me, in the CSS itself, like not
Yeah.
in the utility class names. So it goes down to, but the solutions will be the same.
Yeah, no, for sure.
That's it.
Uh, yeah, I just want to say I had a really great time, and honestly, there's a ton of people on the stream
Same.
still. Um, so I think,
Thank you,
I don't,
Virtual Coffee Group and
yeah,
others.
yeah, yeah. I don't really want to cut it short, but
Yeah.
well, not short, but like I don't want to stop, but we kind of have to, uh, just to respect everybody's time. But if you'd love to come back on, yeah, I think that would be fun. We could do walk through a grid one day or something, or we could just have fun with all kinds of fun examples. Just kind of we could kind of do like a live coding CSS grid mishmash. I don't know what, but who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is the kind of thing where um, it's nice to have some like set up some pre-set up some things to illustrate some certain
Yeah, yeah,
situations, you know. And
Hmm.
we were like trying to force this one a little bit, but um, but yeah, I mean, I love it. I was actually well, whatever. We can talk later, but absolutely. I enjoyed myself too, and this is fun. I like talking about CSS, so nice to
awesome.
have the
We'll
chance to
we'll
do
leave
it.
it at that cliffhanger that Dan will be back at some point. So.
I'll be
Yeah,
back.
so we're just gonna wrap up. I just wanted to, yeah, thanks for coming on, Dan. Thanks for everybody in the stream today. Christina's gonna drop some links if you want to give Dan a follow on all the places where he's at. I think did we send you those or I don't know. Maybe I'm putting you
No,
on the
but I can
spot.
find them real quick.
All right.
I can grab them.
Yeah, and
I'm quick.
yeah, while Christina is doing that, just a reminder, we uh, the stream was a little less. We were pretty busy during Hacktoberfest, then it kind of dwindled down during the end of the year because of holidays and stuff. But since January, we've been going strong every Wednesdays at 1 p.m. We alternate between a pairing session like today and then another one, which is a walkthrough Wednesday, which is somebody in the tech space that we talk to about whatever they'd like to talk about. And that's pretty much how we're doing it all in 2021. So if you haven't already subscribed to the Twitch stream, it's twitch.tv/thepracticaldev. And we will see you next week. I'll try to ramble on until Christina pastes that in the chat, maybe. I don't know.
I got the Twitter. I'm just getting like virtual coffee up, and then I
I
don't know
stuck him
if
in
you want
the I
anything
stuck
else,
him in
Dan.
the I stuck him in the
Oh,
Discord
did you? Oh, there we go. That
Okay,
would have been
thing,
easier.
but
cool. Well,
There
I'll
we
pop
go.
in the
I'm
chat.
gonna drop them all now.
All
no
right.
big deal.
And one,
There we
two. All
go.
right,
There's
there
the
we go.
links. Woo.
Cool. Take care, everybody. Now I gotta find my
Bye.
screen to stop the stream.